It's raining 4K monitors, so today we're going to take a look at the Samsung U28D590. Let's unbox this. Now, this model Samsung is advertised as a 4K display that's with a 3840 by 2160 resolution, and it's a TN panel. That's 4 times as many pixels as a standard 1080 display, and means that you could fit about 4 1080p video streams on this without losing any information. The diagonal size of this display is 28 inches. Now, there are many different kinds of LCD panels, and they run the gamut from very expensive to very inexpensive. And because it's a TN panel, it's meant to be affordable. TN panels typically have lower color accuracy and a noticeable color shift when you view the panel at an odd angle. So if you're not exactly in front of it, if you're to the left or you're to the right, or if you're a tall person or if you're a little bit shorter, that can cause a color shift. And if it's an extreme angle, then you can actually get a color inversion. So if you're above the monitor looking down, you can actually see a color inversion. So that's just the nature of the beast with a TN panel. Now, for this monitor to work optimally, it does require DisplayPort 1.2, although at the back it also has 2 HDMI connectors, a headphone connector, and a DC jack, of course. The 2 HDMI inputs are capable of displaying 4K, the full 4K resolution, but at 30 Hz instead of 60 Hz. If you want a 60 Hz refresh rate, you're going to have to use the DisplayPort 1.2 input. Now, because it has 2 HDMI inputs, it also has a side-by-side picture-in-picture mode where it can take 2 HDMI inputs and display them at the same time. Now, it'll report the resolution to the host computer as 1920 by 2160, so it's effectively half of the monitor. Now, this is pretty cool because you can use 2 HDMI outputs from your computer, and the computer thinks it's 2 separate monitors. Now, of course, gaming's out the window, but for productivity applications and things like that, you can run that way. And because that resolution's lower than 4K, each side of the panel refreshes independently at 60 Hz. So it's sort of a neat trick. With the monitor out of the box, it really does look great, but it's extremely lightweight and it feels kind of cheap. The plastic sort of gives. It feels like if I twist it just the wrong way, it's just going to shatter. There's also no VESA mount on the back of the display, which is very disappointing. The foot looks really cool. It looks like it's made of metal and it's one piece, but it's actually 2 pieces and it just sort of snaps in. There's a lot of give in it, and as far as the angle adjustment goes, it's a very, very not a lot of adjustment capable angle, and that's probably owning up to the way that TN has color shift. If they let you adjust the angle too much, then the colors are going to shift more noticeably. So I think that's why they didn't include a better stand with this. The stand on this is really pretty terrible. So in order to test this monitor out, we decided to take it for a spin on our test rig, which is currently a Gigabyte Z97X SLI with a Plextor M.2 SATA drive. And we also decided to test it with our current test laptop, which is an Asus UX301LA. So let's take a look. Now, for the laptop testing, we are pleased to report that the HDMI on the laptop worked fine at 4K 30 Hz, and it could even drive 2 4K displays at once, but we'll have more on that in our upcoming video on the UX301LA. So, at the back of the monitor, there is only one button. It's sort of a 4-way joystick with a button. Despite that, it was easy to make our way through the menus and fiddle with all the options. When we first got this monitor set up on the test bench, the color calibration was way off. It wasn't even in the right zip code. Both our reference panels, which are IPS, and a Dell 4K panel, which is professionally calibrated out of the box but is also a TN panel, looked way better. So we knew that TN is capable of better color accuracy than this when we got it out of the box, but we weren't sure what was up. So we spent some time fiddling with it, and we were able to recalibrate the display to get the colors to be better. But it was somewhat disappointing that, one of the selling features on this display is 1 billion colors, which is sort of, one of the major selling points from Samsung. This panel also had a noticeable color shift when moving around even slightly, as is noticeable from our benchmarks using Heaven. So here's some video that sort of shows some different angles while the Heaven benchmark is running in the background, and you can kind of see the color shifts and some of the stuff like what I'm talking about. Now, the monitor that we're using for our reference in this is the UP2414Q. That's only a 23-inch 4K display, but it's also a TN panel, and it, like I say, it ships factory color calibrated. So on the Samsung, there are some OSD display options for tuning what appeared to be frame and input latency and colors and things like that. So we fiddled with those settings to try to get it as good as we could. We thought this was interesting in the Heaven benchmark because when we were doing scene shifts, we were noticing when we were reviewing the footage that it seemed like the Samsung was maybe running a little behind the reference monitor. So we decided to do some frame latency tests as well. Now this is not a true frame latency test. We're really only just comparing one monitor to another. There could be 10 seconds of input latency. This is really only measuring the difference between the two monitors. So let's take a look at the frame latency stuff. So in order to test this, we set up the output on the computer to basically clone the output to both displays, so that both displays were displaying exactly the same thing. We then set up our camera to take extremely high speed photography. I think it was 1/1250th of a second with the appropriate ISO setting to be able to capture that, so we could snap still shots of the monitors at a very quick point in time and see what the numbers on the screen said. And so because there's a difference in those numbers, it gives you an idea the number of milliseconds that one display is off from another. And these shots and this experiment that we did basically shows the Samsung typically is running 1 to 2 frames at a 60 Hz refresh rate behind the Dell monitor. That's not terrible. That's completely not terrible at all. And in the Heaven benchmark, when it's switching scenes, it looks and feels like it's considerably more than that. So there may be something going on in the monitor firmware that it's detecting a scene change or doing something like that. It's really not off-putting. It's not happening so slowly that it's a bad thing, and it's not typically something that would be, you know, a make or break situation in gaming. We just thought it was interesting. But all in all, that's not really a big deal. We do notice that the blacks and the scenes that have a lot of contrast, the blacks are a lot richer and deeper on the Samsung panel than the Dell reference panel that we're using. It's really interesting. There are some gamma options in the on-screen display that could probably be tweaked to suit taste, but you know, that some of that comes down to a matter of personal preference. Color reproduction otherwise, once it was fiddled, it did seem like the gamut between the two was at least comparable, so that's good. And there wasn't really anything else crazy that we noticed or anything out of the ordinary that we noticed when we were doing the side-by-side testing and the gaming tests. Conclusion. We did find sometimes this monitor is a bit fiddly and we have to turn it on and off. I'm not sure if that's because we were plugging and unplugging way more than they expected it to and it was crashing the firmware or something goofy like that. It seemed to have trouble changing modes sometimes. One time it locked up completely and just, it was like it was off and we had to turn it off and then it like turned it on to the on-screen display and then turn it off and then turn it back on and it was fine. It wasn't a constant thing. I'm sure that it was because we were fiddling with it, but I thought that was interesting. The lack of a VESA mount is really disappointing, and the out-of-the-box color calibration, the color calibration was so off on the one that we got. I'm surprised that no one else is reporting it, so maybe it was just down to the particular one that we got. It was shipped in that box directly from China, so there was no other packing or anything than what you saw. There was a shipping label on the box exactly as it was. So that's kind of surprising, but you know, it made it here in one piece. I guess that's okay. I would really like to see a VESA mount, and I would really like to see better color calibration out of the box if it wasn't just down to one panel in the future. At 28 inches, it's very easy to get used to the 4K resolution. The pixels are small, but not too small. It's 157 pixels per inch. If you have good eyesight and you're only sitting 18 to 24 inches from your monitor, you may not even need a scaled font. And if that's the case, you can really take advantage of the desktop real estate that this thing offers. 28 inches really seems like the sweet spot for 4K, at least for me. You've got to have DisplayPort 1.2. This is DisplayPort 1.2 compatible. That seems solid, and that supports a 60 Hz refresh rate. So that's a must for a 4K display. Despite its very serious flaws, it's priced aggressively, and it's a solid option for work and play, as long as color accuracy is not mission critical. That's been the review and overview of the Samsung U28D590. Have you got one? Let us know what you think. Comment, rate, subscribe, let us know. Until next time. So this is a first generation TN panel from over 5 years ago. And this is a modern TN panel. Can you guys see that? When I go down, the color shift. All right, let's try to make the displays approximately the same angle. So that's approximately the same angle. Tilt on the display. So if I do another squat thrust, what is going on there? So that's sort of some of the insanity that I've been experiencing. So colors. Now remember, the 4K Samsung has billions of colors, and this is a TN panel, which probably isn't even 8-bit color depth. I mean, I'm being facetious, obviously it is, but you know, before you reply. So let's take a look at other features of this Samsung from 9 years ago. Look at this. It tilts. Look how much it tilts. That's crazy. That's completely insane. Oh, wait, height adjustable. It's height adjustable. Let's see what the tilt on the 4K does. That's all you get. I see they're both flaky when you tilt them. It's not just the really old one that's been horribly abused. You know, in terms of color accuracy, the old one really does look a little better. And that's completely insane. How is that even a thing? Ancient Samsung from the dawn of time? Modern Samsung. Wake up. Modern Samsung, but with focus this time. How is this a thing? Now, to be completely fair, it does have a couple different modes for color, because I think they knew this was a problem, and I think this is why the stand is terrible. Standing mode. That one's the one that works the best, in my opinion. So now that's off. How are our colors looking? Yeah, so this profile is one that is unmodified with the color corrections. It's completely insane. So that's why I have a really hard time recommending this monitor. There are going to be better 4K monitors soon. And, you know, we've looked at a couple that are better. I know that Samsung can get better results out of a TN panel. It's really hard to see the difference 5 years of development of R&D can make, except just in pixel density. The only real display, I mean, okay, the 4K display, the image quality is a little better than the 1440 by 900 5-year-old, you know, $200 maybe monitor. It is a little better. I'm sort of doing this for a joke, but this is not 5 years of progress. Even for a $500 monitor or a $400 monitor, maybe a $300 monitor. But it's really hard to justify. The things that I did like about this is that 4K in 28 inches is a good resolution. It wasn't too small. I didn't strain my eyes. I didn't feel like I was sitting too close to it. I thought it was really good. I did not need to use font scaling. So I think 28 inches for 4K for me, I'm really gonna like that. 4K on something smaller, I don't think is gonna work for me unless I use scaling, but I want the pixels, so I'm not gonna do that. I really, really wanted to like this monitor, but I just can't.